Welcome to Things You Don't Know, the podcast that focuses on little-known facts about well-known people and events, as well as little-known people and events. In this episode, we will focus on one of the more popular historians. Interestingly enough, this man did not have many academic credentials, but his research was impeccable, and his writing style drew readers into his books. He might be seen as a kind of conversational historian.
Yes, Dr. Weaver, you're quite correct. The historian we're talking about, his name is Bruce Catton, and one of my earliest memories is sitting in my grandparents' rec room at about 6 years old, looking at his picture history of the Civil War. The most abstract battles, even some of the political decisions, suddenly seemed very vivid. They were important to my country and my life. The French call this annales history, which is history about and for the common people. I remember being very sad when the book was over because I thought the adventure was over. And I was thrilled and had a lot of joy in discovering that he'd written many other books. Finding all that was indescribably pleasurable for me.
Yes, although I would never call myself a historian and have never been enthralled with remembering names and dates, I also found Catton's works to be very interesting and even compelling. As you have said, Dr. Deneen, he portrayed events as if they were happening right in front of you.
Dr. Weaver, you're quite correct. As a journalist, he didn't have any time for academic hyperbole or jargon. Catton was determined to give the reader the same excitement he had as a young man growing up in Michigan, hearing the details from actual Civil War veterans.
Wow, he actually talked with some veterans then, huh?
He did. They were quite elderly at the time, but he said they remembered it impeccably. And as a young boy, it was just fascinating to listen to this stuff, he said.
So, how did Catton get drawn into becoming a very, very popular historian? Some of his books were bestsellers. Was he accepted as a historian without having the usual credentials?
Yes, as I said, his background was in journalism, and his first book is about government waste during World War II. He became fascinated by turf wars and, contrastly, partnerships between bureaucrats. He discovered the same thing had happened on both sides of the Civil War, what he called America's greatest tragedy. So he focused in his writing a lot on great partnerships on both sides. The partnership between Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant on the Union side, as well as General Robert E. Lee and General Thomas Stonewall Jackson on the Confederate side. His best-selling trilogy of Civil War writings, published in the 1960s, became the benchmark for all other writers on the subject. He also became recognized because he founded the best-selling and most popular historical magazine, which is called American Heritage.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so he had a way of making the people and their stories in his books the focus, while documenting the normal historical data, such as dates, etc. I'm wondering if his writing style was based on any other set of writings, or if he reinvented historic writing on his own.
Well, he certainly had his own style and methodology, but I know that he was influenced by two other Civil War historians of the era, John Hope Franklin and McKinley Cantor. Dr. Cantor said nonfiction, should flow like a novel, and Dr. Franklin sought to dig out hidden personalities and look at under-researched areas.
Aha. I have heard some people wonder if Catton's focus on the Civil War was racist. What do you think?
I couldn't disagree more. He quotes extensively from the writings of John Hope Franklin, who was a very prominent African-American professor and future Medal of Freedom winner. He actually signs a protest at the Civil War Centennial about the lack of representation of the 54th Massachusetts, which is the African-American regiment which conquered Fort Wagner in South Carolina. And he also wrote articles that covered Colonel Patrick Claiborne's plan to arm and free slaves to fight on the Confederate side.
So, you're saying that reporting or recounting events, no matter what the content, does not give an indication of what a historian believes. Much like a physician writing about cancer does not mean they think everyone should be stricken with the disease.
You're absolutely right. I want to point out, as I said, Catton took the time and trouble, when many were not doing this, to dig out materials on the contributions of African Americans and other underrepresented peoples. It's also important, vital in fact, to remember that making a character three-dimensional does not signal either agreement or disagreement with every decision the character made or every aspect of their personal character. History must be understood in the context of its time and as it happened, free from easy answers and caricatures. The world is a lot more complicated than the version we got in elementary school.
That's for sure. Sean, you and I talk about three-dimensional characters in history and three-dimensional characters in looking at historical events, etc. Maybe we should say a little something about what do we mean. I know what it means to me, and I know that you have a grasp on that too. When I talk about a three-dimensional character, much as you would talk about it in a work of fiction, you're talking about giving some insights into what that person might be thinking, how they did things, not just what they did, but how they did them, the subtle nuances, the good, the bad, the strange that a person or a character or an event might entail. How do you see a three-dimensional character?
Well, I think you are basically accurate. I would add that it shows not only ambiguity, reality as it is, as you say, good, bad, and strange, the prospect for growth, change, development, and as we say, it's important to look at motives. It is very easy to come up with what I call a Star Wars approach to everything, where all of the good guys never put a foot wrong, never make a single mistake, and on the other side of the page are people totally irredeemable and abominations before God and history, is it?
Beam me up, Scotty.
Yes, but the world, thankfully, and more interestingly, is not like that. I think many of our podcasts and profiles will show things about individuals, good and bad, that we did not know before. And to me, that's what makes it such fun. Ferreting all that out, discussing it, recognizing other people's contributions and points of view, but being able to operate in an atmosphere of mutual respect and tolerance.
So, kind of moving on, Catton did research and write on other topics than the Civil War, did he not?
Yes, his most famous non-Civil War book is called Waiting for a Train, and it's a 2-century history of his home state of Michigan that looks at how technology, particularly the development of the automobile, transformed the state's image, made its economy take off like a rocket, and gave opportunities in many industries and areas that wouldn't have been thought of before. He also spends a lot of time discussing how Native Americans make use of rubber and how that was adapted by auto magnates to make tires and other pieces of equipment.
Yes, and we have a segment on Native Americans. In that segment, we talk about the Native Americans actually being one of the first peoples to not only invent extraction of rubber, but also using it in various and sundry means. I think at this point we've kind of covered things, and we do hope that our listeners have enjoyed this episode, and that you will give it a like and subscribe. It is very important that you do both, and we're going to have some special advantages that we're going to extend to our subscribers coming in the near future. We'll talk about that later. If you have suggestions or comments, you can leave them here or write to us at the number 2 DOCS and E21 at gmail.com. That's 2 docs and E21 at gmail.com. We have many topics coming and hope you'll join us as we explore them. Remember, history is being made by everyone, every day, including you. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great one. Bye for now.
Have a good day, my friends. Bye-bye.